maths lead here at Fremantle. So from my perspective, what I want to see in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, because you've heard about your nursery and year R, but in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, what I want to see with regards to the pegs to count up is those the concrete materials and being used to support them pictorially, but then also then in the abstract format, which is where they're actually applying their skills. We work here, our programme of work, we use a company called Maths No Problem. They provide us with the workbooks and all the online teaching materials, but they don't provide us with any physical materials. However, they're constantly saying it should be concrete, pictorial, and then abstract. And that's what we do, and we do a very much a we do, you do, we do, you do approach. As they move into year 1, lots of the children have still not achieved, are not at the level they should be to move into the year 1 and Key Stage 1 curriculum. They are still working on the early learning goals, they're still working at a nursery or reception level. So therefore continuous provision and explorative play are just as important here in Key Stage 1, in year 1 and year 2. And as Nina explained, our demographic of children that come into the school are, we might get children who come to us in year 4 or year 5 who have no English, who haven't been in school for a long time. Particularly, I think in Southampton, we will end up having quite a few refugees from Afghanistan coming to us. They will potentially have not ever had the opportunity to work with concrete materials like the pegs to count up. So actually, as a maths lead, I would want to see this in all of the classrooms from nursery right up to year 6. And now I'm going to just basically talk you through what Nina and I worked together very much through the holidays in trying to see ways in which we could support the national curriculum objectives for maths. And the tool that we use to help us place the pegs to count up products in the maths curriculum was the NCETM progression of skills. Now NCETM is they are the gurus in maths and very much have supported us in working on the new early years reform, the new way of looking at maths in nursery. And we use NCETM an awful lot in school to support us with our progression. And their website is superb. And again, they use photographs. So if there's any way that a pegs to count up can appear in their photographs, that would be amazing too. And particularly now, what we're thinking in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 is we are really already seeing the impact of COVID and the impact of the fact that these children were at home for about 6 months over the last 2 years, not using concrete products to support them in their maths. And when they came back to school, when we did our baseline testing of our children in maths when they came back to school, we realised that even though we did online learning with them and we were holding up things and we were saying go and get some pieces of pasta and see if you can use them to count up, they had missed actually interacting with the products in school, and therefore their fine motor skills were also restricted. So again, that is where over this next 12 months, it's going to be crucial that staff use equipment such as pegs to count up to support those particularly the 20% of children who really in the lockdown had very little learning that took place. And for them, actually having these concrete materials will be vital. So what I've done is I've set up a range of the activities based on the national curriculum and also looking at Nexus is progression of skill for year. These are year 1-2 kind of activities that would be used. We would revisit a lot of what Nina has done down in early years and the ladies in year R have done as well. But we would then need to build and show progression. The children, we would know, would come up with good understanding. They would be very familiar with the rods, particularly if they've used them continuously throughout the day for signing in and everything. So therefore we would engage them with those pieces of equipment, but we would want them to be showing us how they could use them in their own independent work and learning. We came up with so many ways in which Pegs to Count Up can be used for number. And number is key to everything. We'll all be starting next week with place value, or this week, when our children come in on Thursday and Friday this week, we'll be starting up with place value. We'll be starting up with counting. But a big new thing for year 1 children and year 2 children, building on what they'll have done in year R and N, will be subitizing. And subitizing is about being able to look at some objects and know straight away there's 5 objects there. And so subitizing, this is brilliant. Pegs to Count Up is brilliant for subitizing. One of the activities we've got here, which is a subitizing activity, is there's a wallet, and the wallets have just been filled with the pegs, and in what we want the children to do is take a look at that. Don't count them up, but look at them and try and say to us, how many do you think are in there? Because if they've developed their subitizing skills, they will be able to see there's 2 here, 2 purple ones here, there's a group of 3 purple ones there, and they would be able to start to tell us how many they think is there and explain why they know by saying things. I can see 5 black pegs there, and I can see another 3 there, and I know that 5 and 3 makes. And we want them to be using these wallets and choosing their own number of pegs and challenging their partners to do that, to show application of their learning and their understanding. So that would be one activity that we would get them to do, and we would model that again, as Nina said, down in early years. It would be still following that same cyclical thing of the exploratory play. So first of all, we'd give them those pegs to actually play with and say, we want you to use them for subitizing, because those children will know that word, subitizing. And now we want you to actually develop a game. And they are so inventive, children. They will come up with ways. I bet if we gave them a whole Pegs to Count Up and said, how could you use this in your classroom? They would most probably come up with better ways to use things, and more freer ways to use things than we would. And the other things we'd have out as well on the table to support that would be our iPads, so that the children could take their own photographs. Because now moving into Key Stage 1, Nina didn't talk about journaling at all, but from Key Stage 1, the children need to start actually journaling what they're doing and using their mark making and using images and pictures in a book to show their mathematical journey. And so for their journals, for that activity with Pegs to Count Up, they would take photographs of some of the subitizing that they'd done, and they'd stick that in, and then maybe with an adult support or with some guided phrases, because up on that board you'll see over there we use lots of STEM sentences with them. So I agree because I disagree, because they may well have some STEM sentences that are there to help them write about what they've been doing with the Pegs to Count Up and what it now has meant that they can do, so that they can see and they can understand the different groupings and the subitizing and moving things together. And on this same table here, over there, we've got the 5 boards there, and we've used them. We would get children to again be doing the counting up, just like they were doing in early years and reception, but we'd also, and again this is where Pegs to Count Up is so fantastic, you have the 3-dimensional ways of doing that, and this lends itself beautifully to data analysis. Actually, this whole product, there are so many ways in which you can use this for data handling and statistics, which are key. And at an early stage here in year 1, this would be a very basic way of using it. So again, at the end of, we have team points and house points. And house points, we could get the children to actually show how many house points each of the teams have got by the end of the week, and then they can do the comparison, and that is the start of graphing and bar graphing, so they can see that there in the 3-dimensional way. But the tactile nature of it again helps them to embed the concrete into in a more abstract way. Things like, Nina and I kept using the word, after we'd done some basic work with the Pegs to Count Up, or the teaching side of things, so the adult-led, we then started talking about the fact that challenge the children to. And Pegs to Count Up is a great pack for challenge. And I think Nina did mention about the children developing their own work on this. So here, this is a challenge which says create your own number problems using the pegs and the rods, and create your own number stories. We talk about number stories, and on here I've got a board which is set up for the starter. This is a number story that a child may well have developed. So they've said 2 plus 2 there, and then they might have add this and then equals, and again they would write on with the chalky pastels here so that they could build their own number stories, and they would talk us through what's happening, and we as practitioners would watch them doing that and listen for the vocabulary that they were using whilst they were actually manipulating all of the Pegs to Count Up pieces, which would be brilliant for us. Fractions, again, fantastic. So a challenge here was using Pegs to Count Up, how many different ways can you show a half? Now in SATs tests, which happen in year 6 at key stage, end of key stage 2, the people that put together the SATs papers do things to trick our children. And one thing we are really keen to do when we're working with fractions with children is for them not to see it in the traditional half and half way, because and always in the same orientation. It's about understanding that that is still a half and that is a half. It's the same as. And again, Pegs to Count Up allows you to do that and get children to explore and show, and they can set each other the challenges to use to show fractions at a very, very basic level, but also then Mark, I know most probably might touch on the fact that it's brilliant for ratios, actually physically seeing a ratio. But fractions are so hard for children, and ratio and percentage is so hard for a child to do. I think a lot of adults, when they're asked to work out a percentage of something, have to go back and say, well, what do I do, and what do I press on my phone to work out that? Children every year when we revisit fractions find it so hard, and it's no use just talking about a pizza and chopping up a pizza into fractions. We need the children to actually physically work on actually showing different amounts and different fractions of. One thing they find really hard is when you ask them what fraction is not coloured in. That's a key thing, a question often on a key stage 2 paper is what fraction is not coloured in, and they can't say what that fraction is. Again, with the Pegs to Count Up, there's plenty of opportunity for them to do that. The other thing is, of course, then position, and it's amazing for position and rotating and everything, starting a child's sort of starting at one place and then giving another child instructions. I want you to move that. So because you've got multiple rods, it's great, because I want you, the child then says, I want you to move it 3 along and 2 down, and the child then places it there. And that can also be done on the board, because you can use these to write up your x-axis and your y-axis, which would be fantastic, and again incredibly visual for the children to use. So that rotation, the only disadvantage is that on here you can't show that, but if you were to just have a blank, one of the blank words, they could actually then rotate and put place diagonally as well, which would be really good. Nina and I kept talking about the fact that we've got so many children now. There are very few special school places for children now, so we are inclusive, and we have children. We have children starting with us in September who have motor difficulties with motor skills, who cannot have visual impairment. These again are amazing pegs to count up for visually impaired children, because our visually impaired children, you saw the Numicon is too small almost. If you're a visually impaired child, this is just wonderful because you can feel, and again, if you are hearing impaired, it's fantastic because there's that noise that it makes, that noise you can hear. So even if a child is hearing impaired, you could actually be working, a learning support assistant could be working with them and actually saying to them, listen, how many pegs am I putting in? Because you can hear that sound going in, which is fantastic. The board, the dice games as well, and it's lovely to see the dice in the new count up. The challenge over here is using 2 dice, roll the pegs to match the dots and share the pegs equally between the pots. How many do you have each? So again, children will come up with their own ideas for this. Further up the school in year 3 and 4, I would expect to see teachers setting up pegs to count up so that children could develop that, you know, you've learnt that sharing equally, this is what we do to share equally. Can you make up a game with the dice in order to show that you can actually do that? And you can, that game needs to be for 2 or 4 or 6. And you can see the tables here in year 2 and in year 1 are in groups usually of 6, which would be ideal for playing with that side of things. And also then rolling the dice and then having the number of pegs matching to the numbers on the dice, but then also then going and finding other objects to show that they really do understand 3 and they understand 4 from around the classroom. I'm thinking that's most probably all of the actual activities that I've got laid out here on the tables. So the main focus then as well would be for us to extend the children further by saying, can they journal what they've done and actually show? And what we like about pegs to count up and the rods is to actually, for them, they can draw around these, they can draw around them in their books and show and put the dots there rather than faffing around with a ruler, although they will have their Nexus rulers out ready to draw there and have their beautiful Nexus pencils to draw around very carefully. And of course, if they want to do blobs, they'll have their Nexus pens as well to do that. So brilliant for doing that, brilliant for drawing around these on their whiteboards as well. And again, Mark will show you again upstairs when we go to year 6 why the rods are key, and they are so good because they are large and they are in this format as well. And there's nothing else in the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 classrooms that can compare to this. So for going into schools and for, you know, getting the attention of that maths coordinator who then has to go to a penny pinching head who wants to know, you know, where, you know, if I ask Kevin for some maths equipment, I have to get not just 3 quotes, I have to get 4 or 5. Then when we decide and Kevin says okay to that company, then it's a case of him saying, right, have you knocked them down? Have you knocked them down? And when I thought I've knocked them down enough, then Kevin sometimes says, oh, just give me the phone number. And then amazingly, because Kevin has the gift of the gab, he charms them and he'll come back to me and say, you're sacked, or no salary next month, Kevin, because I've just saved another £500. But I need to know, as a maths coordinator, I can convince my head teacher as the maths lead that this product is going to have an impact across the school, and my head teacher is then going to have to then want me to show the directors through the work that they see in the journals how that equipment has been there. And again, there's very little evidence at the moment that we've got in our journals further up the school, and now having played with it this summer, I'm going to be supporting my team to be able to do that. Luckily as well, I'm also the lead for professional development here in school. And one thing I would again say is when you're promoting pegs to count up for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 classrooms is the best thing teachers can do is play with it themselves and but allow their children to play with it, because through walking around, you will hear and think, yeah, we could do that next week. I certainly think as well, we have something called extended provision in school, which is after school, 2 days a week. We do maths clubs for children who are pupil premium children and free school meals children who have fallen behind. And maths club needs to be fun. Maths clubs needs to be something exciting and something tactile, not just like it is on a normal lesson, because the whole point is these children have fallen behind because they've remained, they're quiet within the classroom, you lose them within the classroom. At an extended provision maths club, pegs to count up, and I last year I did use pegs to count up with my year 3 maths club that I had. They loved that because again it was very much the practical side of things, the concrete manipulation, and then having that visual image. And many times as they went out they would say, we played with the pegs to count up today, and that's what to their parents as they went through the gate. And they think, if they think it's play, you've won, because they don't think it's work then, and that's a key thing. And a key thing for me is as well, our children have had, as I said at the beginning, quite a barren, some of our children have had a very barren year of learning, and this, from out of that barren year of learning comes a colourful product, a colourful, practical, physical product that those children can use, and actually it will make a difference to their learning. It will make a difference because we can use it for an intervention, but I'm very much seeing and hoping that in Key Stage 2 particularly, when the children are applying, so we do our teaching, we do our in-focus task, we do our guided practice, when I then set the children off to do their independent learning, and then they're doing their chili challenges afterwards, that some of their chili challenges will involve them showing me practically. It's a great tool for assessments and a great tool for unpicking what children are thinking and what processes they're using and the mistakes and the misconceptions that they're having. And again, that's where the rods and the pegs, all of the equipment will be so fantastic, and is fantastic.